This is the Business Storytelling Show with Christoph Trapp. Name a top 20 storytelling podcast and a top 5% podcast globally. Christoph chats with thought leaders and experts to share tips and tricks that can help you tell your company's stories better to drive business results. Available wherever you listen to podcasts, live streamed on major social media channels, and part of the DB&A television network, available on most U.S. television sets and streaming on Roku and Amazon Fire. Here's Christoph with today's episode. Let's go.
Let's go, business storytellers. How's everyone doing today? Today we want to talk about technology. Now, you may remember my opinion about technology changes all the time. 2 years ago, I told you just need an iPhone. And here's the thing. You only do need an iPhone. Get started. Now, when you look at my background today, I got a physical background behind me. I got all this stuff happening. I got an iPad in front of me, iPad Pro, nonetheless. I got a light over here. I got two lights over there. So I'm bought in that equipment matters. But if you are planning on listening and watching today's show to use for everything we're talking about as an excuse to not get started, you're not in the right place. It's not an excuse if you don't have a big light. It's not an excuse if you don't have a mic. You can get started either way. But let's talk about equipment today. What do you do? What do you think about? What do you do? Where do you spend your money first? And that's actually one thing I did. I spend my money one thing at a time. I bought a camera. I bought a little bitty ring light. I bought a big ring light. And then I bought other stuff. Today's guest, Junaid Ahmed. He is a tech enthusiast, passion for storytelling and problem solving. He's a podcast host, frequently shares his thoughts and expertise on what equipment should you use. Let's get him on the show here. Welcome. Good to see you today.
Hey, Christoph. So good to see you and so excited to be here.
That's great to hear, and I really appreciate you making time. So let's talk about your passion for when it comes to technology. What's driving you?
And so I've been involved with the tech for the past 3 decades. I absolutely love it. I got introduced to my first computer back in 92, and I was like, this is really interesting, really exciting. So I've been in that world for that long, and I was building computers. I was assembling machines. I was playing with this for so long. What's really exciting about technology is that it's always changing. So you're always excited. You're always figuring out new things and figuring out, oh, how did they come up with that? I'm always tinkering inside. So that's what got me really interested in the technology space.
That's awesome. And I'm not building any computers or anything like that. What's interesting to me, though, is the trigger word you said is build things, right? And kind of when I talked, I know we don't have the white shot today. Maybe we should have set that up, but we didn't. So we're moving forward. But, that's kind of what I did. I like, oh, I need this. Oh, I like how to put it on my desk. Oh, I like to have the light on a tripod. So I slowly build my setup based on what I like. I mean, that's kind of, you hinted at that as a model, I guess.
Absolutely. You start from, like you were mentioning earlier, you don't have to go out and get everything and then be like, oh, how do I put all of this together? You got to start slow. You got to take the number one step. Okay, what's the first step that I can do to start creating content? Well, we already have the most powerful camera in the universe and it's already in our pocket, right? So use what we got and then upgrade and add to that setup as you go along. Now, it took me about a year to dial in everything that I have in my studio. But yeah, build on top of the things that you already figured out.
Yeah, and that's interesting to me too. But how do you decide where to start? So I'm trying to think back where I started. So, I mean, I had a little bitty light. And I think I really just used my iPad and my iPhone when it comes to the camera and the mic. Then I used my AirPods Pro, maybe just regular AirPods. But they weren't truly a podcasting or live streaming purchase, right? Because I just bought them to go to the gym.
Yeah.
So like, what's the first thing you need to buy? Is it a mic? I mean, audio is so important, right? I mean, if the
Yeah.
audio isn't good, nobody's going to listen to it.
Absolutely. The audio is my number one recommendation as well. You know, you got to be able to sound good. You got to be able to, people watching your video, your content should be able to hear you loud and clear. So my first purchase was, let me go get a microphone to get this podcast started. But then guess what? I didn't use that microphone for a whole year because I was too afraid. It's like, I don't know how I'm going to sound on here. So I just started the bare minimum. I started my podcast and recorded it on my iPhone because we had the capability to do that.
Yeah, and that is interesting. That's kind of how I started everything, quite
Mhm.
frankly. You know, I just had my iPhone. So why were you scared though of the microphone? Just because it was like so high end, or like you didn't know how to set it up? That's, you know, one thing I hate when I buy new equipment and it says easy to assemble. And I'm like, what are they talking about? This is super difficult. So this mic that I have now is indeed super easy to assemble. I mean, it's
Mhm.
like I could do it. And then you
Yeah.
hook it up to the desk. And I'm a big fan of having everything hooked up. So
Yeah.
I don't, you probably can't tell, but I got a standing desk, right? So today I'm
Mhm.
standing, and when I move the desk up, everything moves up.
Yeah.
The framing changes. But why, what took a year?
I was traveling. See, it all comes down to time, right? You can buy all the equipment that you want, but if you don't have enough time to spend with it, you can't. So the reason it took me a year to actually start using my microphone was, well, I was mostly traveling. I was mostly commuting and recording an episode of a podcast on my phone, which was a lot easier for me to do. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to record my podcast on my iPhone. The upgrade I did do for the microphone space on there is that I got a USB microphone that had, you know, a noise canceling capability and connected to my iPhone, my iPad. So while I'm driving back and forth from work, I was recording my podcast episode through, on the mobile device. But then when I was back in the studio and doing in person or recording conversations and interviews, that's when I started then using the microphone.
So that's interesting too, because you always have to think about what's your setup, right? So I used to do my iPhone very similar all the time because I was traveling, you know, and then sometimes I would have a little lavalier mic, which kept breaking, or I put it somewhere, I couldn't find it, or whatever it might be. And so that didn't work to an extent. But honestly, you can just use your iPhone, just hold it up to people's face,
right?
And it sounds fantastic. I mean, it really does.
Yeah.
But now the last 16 months or whatever it's been, who knows, 10 years here, right? Thank you, COVID. I mean, I've been at home, right? So I actually set up my studio, and like right here, I got this virtual backdrop, I got the lights and everything. So I kind of like it. I like how it sounds. I like how easy it is. I like how it feels. So I probably could go back to traveling. I don't know if that ever happens. We'll see. But and go back to the iPhone, or when I'm out and about and record stuff. But I also like the setup I have now. I think it sounds good. It sounds better. I was joking. I said, if I have to go to an in-person meeting, do I have to bring a light? You know what I mean?
Really excellent question.
Yeah. So how do you decide though? Like, so when you start, you know, like, is the mic the first purchase? And like, I mean, what are we looking at? Like, what kind of mic do we need? How fancy does it need to be?
Yep. So that's a great question. So getting started, the first thing that you want to focus on is, what's the message that you're trying to deliver? Does it require video? Yes, video enables us to make a really good connection. So on the video, let's say you're using your iPhone, your smartphone, you still got to provide good lighting. So before you even buy a microphone, because our phones do a really good job in capturing that audio, especially now that they have 3 different microphones, one to record your voice, others to block out everything else, lighting is the first thing that I would purchase, right? You already got good audio from your phone. Let's bring in the light to your scene. Light up your scene so that people can actually see, because they can already hear you. And then let's say you want to, anyways, you mentioned the lav mic. That did a really good job. It's close to the subject. It's close to the source of audio, that is your mouth. So that one does a great job. So a good price, $20 max lav mic that's wired into your phone or wired into a recorder. There's another piece of equipment. Good lighting. And if you don't have good lighting, you don't need to buy a light. You can go in front of a window, add some curtains on it, so then it's softening the light that's coming through, and voila, you've got a pretty good starting set.
Yeah, so that's interesting too. So when it comes to lighting, for the longest time ever, I just found the best well-lit place nearby.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, I never actually got to the point where I had a traveling light that I thought worked. I mean, I had like the little bitty round one, but how big? What kind of what kind of light do you recommend when people are traveling? I mean, is it just one of those things like you can put around your phone, or how does that look? What's the best setup?
See, in those kind of situations, depending, number one, the first thing that you want to do is record daytime, right? Record in the daytime because there's plenty of free light available. Find a shade, find some place that you can record. Now, those itty bitty lights, they look really great in the products shots that they show you. But when you're actually using it, it does like, wait, my shots don't look the same way that they showed me in the product shot, because those are product shots. They're marketing shots. So depending on, I think the lume cubes are really good because they have a good number of lumens coming out of it, anywhere from 100 to 200 lumens, maybe even higher. Now, don't quote me on the numbers, but those are some of the things, some of the lights that you can start with. The lume cube, for $60, you got a really nice cube that you can attach to your phone as well. Will work really nicely in nighttime or, evening time. Again, it's all comes down to, hey, what time of the day can I record this content? Should I be recording it?
So that is one thing when I noticed that this the first time how my lighting could really use some work, because I was giving a keynote in Singapore, and of course it was virtual, so it was like 10:30 p.m. my time, and of course it was dark here, and I just didn't look right. I mean, there's an actual window right over there, so the sun is coming in. Even though I'm a little ways away from it now, but that's when I noticed, how do I make myself look a little better? The other thing when it comes to lighting, people always ask, oh, how do I get the ring light out of my glasses? So do you see the ring light in my glasses?
I don't see it. I don't see it right now. No.
You don't see them. So the reason you don't see them, and this, I think people forget about this. So I have one light over here that basically shoots up, and then it lights up the background behind me. And then I have a huge ring light over there. So it's actually not right in my face. Yeah. And I think sometimes people need to remember that just because you're trying to light yourself, that doesn't mean you need to put it right in your face. And I think the ring lights in your glasses, or I mean, you don't wear glasses, I guess, right? But yeah, it's just very, I mean, it's not a very good experience for the viewer.
Right, it's not. And it's also distracting if you're looking at yourself in the camera, and after the fact you record, you're looking at your recording, you're like, I wish I could take those lights out. And the simplest solution, either you put it far away or you raise it high enough so that it does not reflect in your glasses and point it out.
So high enough is a good tip. I do that too. Right now, like in this setup, when I'm standing, I'm 6'4", the higher it doesn't go because it actually does go about this high. It goes pretty high. but it doesn't go any higher.
Right.
So, but you
Right.
can move it. When it comes to technology, though, how do you, let's say you have guests on, what's your philosophy there? So for example, I mean, you have a good setup, I have a good setup, and I've actually been on shows before. I think Jay Baer does it on his show, and he used to send people a microphone to record it, so it sounds good. I mean, what's your philosophy on that? You know, when the host sounds really good and the guest sounds terrible, how do you get around that?
Well, that's a great question. What I've done is when people sign up to be guests on my podcast, I'll send them that first email and tell them, hey, if you don't already have good equipment, you can go buy this $15 headset microphone that's got built-in voice, what do you call that? Noise reduction. And it's going to connect directly to a USB or on your computer so that we can hear you properly. And so that's been my recommendation. And some other recommendations that have, even though, okay, let's say they got good audio, a lot of the time that when they're talking, there's echo in the rooms because they haven't treated their walls or they're in a very open space. I'll tell them, hey, just drop some blankets around you so that we providing less surface area for the voice to bounce off of.
I think the room is very difficult to remember, honestly. And I was working on a project where they had set up a podcast room, but as the name says, it's for podcasts. It's not for live streams. So, you know, it doesn't look good. So I think my background looks good. I think your background looks good. But when I had like a audio studio, you know, 15 years ago, think about that, right? Like it wasn't designed to look good. It was just designed to go in there and record the audio. So that's another thing to think about, is because my prediction is, so what we're doing here, in case you guys aren't aware, we're live on all these different channels. It's going on DBNA television in a few days. So that goes on TVs, Roku, et cetera, et cetera. And then the podcast version goes just audio only. But I think there's a trend that more and more podcasters will do video versions, even if they don't do video live streams, even though I think they should, quite frankly. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't. So how do you, how does that work? You know, you set up your room for good audio, but how do you set up your room for good visuals?
Absolutely. So the program that I go through is, let's figure out where you're located in your room, where you're going to be recording this video from, right? So look at where the windows are, look at where the doors are. You don't want any doors in your shot, because what if people are walking in? What if you have stuff hanging on there? So just analyze the entire room, analyze the space that you're going to be in, recording your video, and then figure out, okay, this is where I can put the lights up. This is where the window is. So this is where I want the camera to face, not face at, you know, be the back of the camera. And it's going to be providing good lighting to me, and then have audio, blankets around me to absorb the sound. I've got some nice backdrop. Like this is actual physical background, and my cameras are not working. Of course, there was just on a little. It just
disappeared for a second. That is actually behind you, right? It's a physical background.
Yeah, this is a physical background that I can walk into, that I set up in such a way, and I have a camera in the back that's not activating right now. And I was looking at, I'm like, okay, where's my camera? And yeah, it's not turning on right now. But it shows you my entire setup, where the lights are located, how they're mounted, and that enables me to come in here, press the record button, and start recording video, so that I can spend less time finagling with that stuff. You know, I spent a whole 6 months to a year to tweaking all of this stuff out. So now I can just focus on the content. I can focus on the educational materials, the stuff that I want to teach, right? So spending that time up front totally makes it so much easier.
Yeah. And, you know, and here's the other thing. I finagle my stuff all the time.
Oh, yeah.
I'm thinking about, do I want a different physical backdrop? Where do I move the lights? How do I set up this? How do I do this? Where do I put my phone? Right now, I'm going to show you guys. I'm actually holding the iPad Pro in my hand, right? This is how I'm producing the show. So when you see me look down, I'm literally standing here, right? And I'm pushing the buttons.
Yeah.
Like here, I'm getting rid of his Twitter handle. I'm putting it back on. I'm putting on a, unmute to hear us, whatever it might be. Yeah. But I'm actually doing that on my iPad. And, so that's another thing to think about. Fiddling with things never changes. Now, when companies try to do this, do they need a whole nother room? Like, I mean, some companies, or even when I'm in Iowa, we got plenty of space in Iowa, but I'm thinking about my friends in New York City. They have no space at all, right? They're not going to be able to set up a studio in their studio apartment.
Right.
How do you do it when you don't have enough room, or when you could use more room?
Well, so for like what you're doing, right? You're using a green screen, or you're using a screen that then replaces or blocks out anything else that's not there. That's definitely a route to go for people to use, a green screen. But what I try to help with is like, okay, what physical space do you have? How can we maximize that physical space? Because you want to be able to use multiple things in here, or be able to. Because the reason I set up my station, my little office over here, the way that I have it, is so I have 3 kids. They come here, they're running around. I actually have a swing hanging from the top bar over here where I have the hair light, because I want it to be an actual working space. I can come in here, do other projects back here, because I want to maximize this little room. People who are in smaller spaces, yes, absolutely. There's so many different ways that you can set up your camera, set up your desktop, so that you're using a wall or using a window or a fireplace or whatever's in your background. You just personalize it just a little bit, spend just a little bit time on, figuring out how you want to be set up. And once you have that information, once you thought through it, every time that you go and set up a new location, you're going to think through those same steps. I'm like, hey, I want to apply those same analogies, same rules, so that I can set up this room over here the right way.
So certainly, as I mentioned, we do have plenty of room in Iowa, but we don't have endless room either. So I set up my office. So what you're seeing me in is actually my office. So when I'm in a minute, when we're done here and I'm going back to writing or editing podcasts or whatever I'm working on for the rest of the day, I'm still in the same spot. The physical backdrop is still behind me. Everything is still the same. The only difference is I'm turning that light off because I don't need that light on. But the other light, it actually fits and I like it. So again, I'm maximizing my space as well. But it certainly takes up more room than just my laptop.
Yes.
Like I just travel with my laptop.
No, absolutely. And when I first started, I had multiple tripods. I had to move the desk back so the tripods could fit in place. I had a tripod for everything: lights, cameras, microphones, right? And then I eventually started moving to mounting everything on my desktop, mounting stuff on it in the ceiling. So now there's minimal footprint and I can have kids running around without knocking stuff over.
Kids or cats in my or cats in my scenario. But I'm actually a big fan of that too. As much as I can hook up to my desk and it's on the desk and it's right there, relatively compact. Yes. Absolutely. Now, do you recommend that companies set up a space in their office if they have an office, or how do you? I kind of keep back and forth on that. And there was somebody, I think it was Gallard the Roch, who posted on LinkedIn and said, "Oh, we're recording podcast in person again." And I'm like, in person again? That's a really good point. I hadn't done it in like 2 years now, and I don't know that I want to. I think it's easier just to be where I am, and go from there. But do you think companies should set up like a studio? People can come in and they can record it there together, or what's your philosophy there?
I think if they have the space to go and do it, have a dedicated space, they've got their branding, they've got the lights and colors, everything's dialed in just the way they want. So now the only thing is changing is the person, the story that they're telling. They can go in there, sit down for an hour, record a ton of videos. Then you can have the next person come in, record a ton of video. Now you hand it off to the production team, and now they can take out the stuff and, produce that stuff, and that's then available to the rest of the crowd and market. I think that's totally doable, because that's going to enable them to focus more on the content that they're delivering, than figuring out, I want to do this live right now, or I want to do this blah blah blah, right? Mm-hmm. So it just takes out the friction. Now you have a space, you're like, I can go in there and get it done, and I'm out of there.
It's so true. And so I do Amazon product videos, about 3 a day roughly, because I'm still kind of catching up. Yeah. And I'm telling you, because I don't have to move anything, I don't have to set anything up. It makes it so much easier, right? So each video is like 2 minutes, and doing 3 takes me less than 10 minutes, maybe 15, including the upload. So absolutely, the easier you can make it, the better. Hey, it was my pleasure to have you on the show. I always learn new things. Really glad we connected, and thank you for sharing your insights.
Absolutely, Christoph. This was a really fun chat. We going back to where we started and how just giving it a go, because a lot of the time the friction isn't all around figuring out, I want this. No. Just start with what you have, because guess what? When a kid is born, they're like, I need to get shoes to start walking. I need to get socks. No, they don't, right? They don't even think about any of that. They just start crawling, they start walking, and then we add on to our complexity as we go, as we get older. So starting your studio, starting your podcast, starting whatever it is, just the first thing is just get started, because as you go, you're going to learn and you're going to enhance and get better at it.
That's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. Please rate and review our show on your favorite podcast channels. And don't forget to share this episode with your networks. We appreciate you. Until next time, let the best stories win.